Matt Marcoux here with our in-house expert, Mr. Michael Scott. Michael, welcome to another economic update. Glad to have you here, buddy.
Matt, happy to be back here with you this morning. What's going on?
Not much. Hey, I heard you were over at our international offices across the seas here this last week or so. How was your trip overseas?
Oh, it was great, man. I got to go travel around Ireland for a week, spent some time in Dublin, Galway, Kilkenny, Killarney, Cork, back to Dublin. Really got to see all of Ireland quickly in a week, but got to go over there with my mom, and we had a really, really good time.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, I love seeing pictures and hearing about your journey and your visits to the various distilleries. It sounded like a really
Yeah,
interesting trip.
when in Rome.
glad, glad you're there, buddy. Well, we are here today to talk economics, and I just want to first, if you're a listener to our all of our content, go ahead and check out canderpath.com/blog. You'll see a lot of our old content on there. Last quarter, Michael wrote a really, really great article talking about where the economy was, sort of related it to being an airline pilot or being a pilot in general, and had a great analogy. I found the article extremely fascinating. Of course, I would because this is what we do for a living. But I encourage you to go back and check that one out after watching today's video here today, and just but it'll help frame where we were. And really, today's discussion is about where we're going. So let's start there first, Michael. Where are we going? I know there's a lot of big headlines, a lot of things that occurred this last quarter here that we're going to talk about, and what's kind of upcoming. Some of those things: lower inflation, rates peaking, our interest rates here in the United States peaking, and talking about some of our economic growth. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Where are we kind of at right now, and what are some things we have, to talk about today?
Yeah, we're really in this interesting position that started about 18 months ago, right? And we all know that starting in 2022, inflation was on an upward trajectory. And we got up to a little over 9% on the CPI, and the Federal Reserve really began cranking on interest rates. And we took interest rates from essentially zero to today, they're well above 5%. Now, the Federal Reserve, their main tool to fighting interest rates or fighting inflation is to use interest rates. So they raise that and they try to cut back on demand. They make you and I think about how much we want to borrow. Do we really need a new vehicle? Do we need a new home? Similarly, do businesses want to open up new plants? Do they want to hire more people? They make everything more expensive in the hopes of slowing down demand. And what we've seen is they've been relatively successful in doing that. We got inflation to come down on the CPI. It was at 9. We got it down to 3.7 in August. And I believe it's about that number here as the September number has rolled out. And they've been extremely successful at bringing that number down and at the same time keeping unemployment low. So our unemployment rate is about 3.7, 3.8 in that range. And I believe it was as low as 3.4, 3.5. And these are historically low numbers on unemployment. Um, and that was always the fear: was could the Federal Reserve slow down the economy and in fact slow down inflation, but keep unemployment from going up very high, which oftentimes coincides with having a recession. Now, when we actually look at what the economy is doing, we're seeing the economy almost seems like it's accelerating. We have GDP coming now into the third quarter. When we wrote this article, it was about 4.9. The most recent estimate slightly above 5. And we just got some numbers this morning that look like that number could be moving upwards even more. So the economy still seems very strong and it's handling these interest rate hikes very well. However, that may not be the case forever, and there could be cause for concern down the line.
Yeah, and I think you've brought up a good point. It's pretty hard to go into a recession, or at least the new rules that have been set up is that a recession
Yeah.
historically was two negative quarters of GDP, and we at some point had that in 22, but we didn't have the unemployment numbers to support the recessionary figure. And so, now again, it doesn't look like GDP is going anywhere near negative at this point. Is that correct? I mean, you kind of just illustrated we have at least last quarter where it landed, and this projection up this next quarter doesn't look like a recession's coming anytime soon. Is that right?
A recession is coming. It's always coming when you're in an expansion mode because at some point every expansion dies and you have a recession. So I want to be careful in saying it's not coming, right? It is. The question now becomes, with the economy seemingly accelerating and unemployment low, what tips us in that direction? And I think for a lot of us right now, whether advisors, analysts, economists, we're looking at the markets and the economy, and our biggest concern is the Federal Reserve, us doing it to ourselves. And, I wrote this article talking about the airplane analogy, and there's two times in flight that are most dangerous. It's takeoff and landing. That's when, the engines are either revving up or they're idling. That's where, you're changing altitude the most. The most things can go wrong. And really, what we're seeing here, and we're talking about this soft landing, can we land this plane and come to a point of safety in the economy? And the fear is really that we're going to apply too much braking, that, we have inflation coming down, interest rates are what they are. Is the Fed going to tighten the screws just a little bit too tight? And I don't know if you've ever seen a spring, but a spring can compress down. You can tighten it down, and then it gets to a point where it's over tightened and it springs back or it breaks. And that's the fear right now, is that the Federal Reserve may tighten past the point that they really needed to, and something breaks in the economy. And that's really what we're concerned about today, not necessarily the growth that we may push ourselves into a recession that didn't need to be yet.
Yeah, and certainly concerned whenever you have, a group of people basically charting our economic course, i.e., being the Fed, and wondering should they have tightened earlier, or did they overdo it or underdo it? And again, I guess hindsight's always 2020, and we can always play Monday morning quarterback. But I think looking forward is making sure that they try to time this right so that they achieve their goal of reducing inflation while not putting us into economic chaos, which is the big concern that I think we have. What was there any other major concerns that you have specifically looking out maybe for the next 90 days or so, and things that we need to keep an eye on as we're watching CNBC or our Yahoo Finance? Is there certain topics or headlines that we should be looking for that are maybe a potential red flag or yellow flag at this point?
Yeah. So, the interesting thing about the Federal Reserve over tightening is that in itself is a concern, but it shouldn't push a 5% growth economy into recession. A Federal Reserve that has over tightened and then you get hit from the side with something else is really, is a concern. That's what becomes concerning. And there are some different hotspots that come up. And I think one that our listeners might be most familiar with or seen on the news the most is this commercial real estate problem. And this is born out of two issues. It's low interest rate lending and low occupancy rates in commercial real estate. So we all know that prior to 2020, most businesses worked in the office. And then a lot of them in 2020 went home during COVID and realized, employees realized, hey, this is awesome. We can do a lot of different things with our family. Like we can take care of us and still be productive. And businesses realized, hey, we're still meeting all of our goals and we're paying rent to a building that we really don't need to pay rent to anymore. So you kind of have this effect where business owners are deciding they don't need their real estate at a time when the owners of that real estate need to refinance their mortgage on their real estate. So you have landowners wanting to lease to people who don't really want to lease anymore, and they need to refinance at higher rates, which means their cost of capital is going up and their funding is going down. So that is a concern. Now, the other side to that is that it's not like all commercial buildings are going to come up for lease or renewal at the same time, right? Just like not everyone's home has the same maturity date. Not every building has the same maturity date on their mortgage. So it's not like we're going to get hit with a wall of this in September of 2024. It's going to be sprinkled in over time. And we know this is coming. So that gives banks the ability to go to their borrowers, these building owners, and negotiate better terms with them, give them extensions on different things. Because a bank would rather lose 500 basis points on a loan for 6 months than foreclose on the building and then have to sell it at a larger loss. It's the lesser of two evils for them. So that is a concern, but we don't think at the moment that it's as big of a deal as you may see if you're watching CNBC every day. And additionally, there's a couple other things out there, right? We all know the auto workers are striking. Why is that a big deal? Well, if not too many F-150s are produced, the prices of existing ones in used cars are going to go up, and that feeds into inflation. And additionally, if they get large price increases on their wages, that feeds back into inflation as well. Now, I'm not saying here that they shouldn't get their raises or they're not due for increase in their comp, but these are things that, as economists, advisors, analysts, we have to be aware of that could shape the economy coming up.
Yeah, and it's probably not ironic that we're both shooting this today from our home offices. We go into our office, a handful of days a week, and I do drive an F-150. So, all really good points to talk about. Now, we would be remiss if we don't talk about the geopolitical climate going on right now, and of course, our thoughts and is seeing what's happening right now in the Middle East is absolutely heartbreaking. But how does this play into the economic landscape, and what are some of your thoughts in terms of the economics that are coming from this really huge upheaval in the geopolitical environment right now?
Yeah, it almost feels insensitive to talk about in the sense of like, how does this affect my wallet? But for all of us, after we get past the initial shock, the question is, how does this affect me? And lucky enough for us living in this country, you know, the number one effect to us is probably going to be like our portfolio or our wealth, or could be, right? We're not going to be affected by rockets coming over. So, you know, the initial thought is, could this affect the portfolio? And when we go back and we look at the data, the reality is, in the long run, no. The data does not suggest that these geopolitical events have long term effects on portfolios or wealth. In the short run, there could be hiccups, right? What's the obvious hiccup with any political or geopolitical event in the Middle East? Oil. Neither Israel nor Hamas are producers of oil of substance. Um, Now, could that change if Iran or Hezbollah gets in and we have a larger spillover to different countries in the Middle East? Absolutely. But at the moment, neither party seems like they're jumping into the fray. And even if Iran did, Iran is barred from selling oil on the open markets at the moment, anyways. So there are some insulating effects there that this political event may not have that initial oil shock. And so far, we haven't seen an oil shock in the markets. Could there be one in the future if certain things happen? Yes, but at the moment, it does not appear that way. Um, and past that, it's very, very difficult to trade around geopolitical events because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what shoe is going to drop next. Um, the data suggests that it's a loser's game and you're best suited to stick to your plan that you've established, because that plan realistically is built to take you through the ups and downs anyways. But these sort of political events, looking back, do not suggest that there is a red light, green light situation of when you should go and when you should stop.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think you hit home the message there that portfolios, if structured correctly, should be not necessarily immune to, but have some of these contingencies built into it. I.e., if you're taking income, having enough cash so that you can survive volatility, or if you're in a growth standpoint of your portfolio in those accumulation years, that you're probably not looking at, the volatility that's occurring on a week by week, day by day, news by news basis, and should just continue with what the plan is. Hey, this has been incredibly enlightening. I always enjoy our conversations. If you want more information, if you want more of our content, please head on over to candorpath.com/blog. There, you'll see a number of articles written by Michael here. You'll have some links to some videos. You'll have a link to our podcast as well to hear myself and John and the Rich B talk about some very timely topics. But we thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of our Candor Path family. And we hope you enjoy our content, and we hope you enjoy what Michael is bringing to us right now. And we want to hope you have just an amazing day. Thank you.